Hey, it's Andrew. Tonight, I've got 3 unsettling stories that were sent in by real people. Experiences they swear actually happened. What started as routine late-night shifts at gas stations or simple stops during long drives suddenly turned into encounters with people and situations that defy explanation. The kind of moments that make you realize how vulnerable we are when we're alone in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by darkness, with no one to help. But before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel across the world. Let me know in the comments. I try to read as many as I can. Alright, turn the lights down, keep your doors locked, and let's get started. Story 1. The Blood-Covered Man, Parts 1 and 2. I actually have 2 stories that are connected, both from when I worked late nights at a gas station in rural Montana. My name is David, and this happened about 6 years ago, back before every business had state-of-the-art security cameras and alarm systems monitoring every corner. It's not that security didn't exist, but for a small operation in the middle of nowhere, it wasn't exactly a priority. Plus, the owner was notoriously cheap. The job itself was laughably easy. I worked the overnight shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., usually completely alone. Traffic was minimal, maybe a dozen customers on a busy night. Most of my time was spent reading magazines, restocking shelves, or fighting to stay awake during the dead hours between 2 and 5 a.m. The most difficult part of the job was actually dealing with the owner, Marcus. The guy had the memory of a goldfish. We'd have the same arguments multiple times a week about scheduling, inventory, cleaning procedures. It was like he'd completely forget we'd already discussed something and bring it up again like it was brand new. But whatever. The pay was decent for what amounted to getting paid to do nothing most nights. This first incident happened on a Wednesday night, I think. Definitely during the week because weekends were slightly busier. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 a.m. The exact time doesn't matter because those hours all blur together when you're working overnight. The store becomes this isolated bubble where time stops having meaning. I was leaning against the counter, magazine open in front of me, trying to stay awake. The only sound was the faint buzzing of the old fluorescent lights overhead, a noise I'd gotten so used to that my brain had learned to filter it out completely. Which is why I jumped so badly when the door chime went off. I looked up and immediately felt my blood run cold. A man had just walked in. Tall, probably 6'2" or 6'3", black, maybe early 30s, athletic build. My first thought was former college athlete or maybe military. But that's not what made me freeze. He was covered in blood. Not splattered. Not spotted. Covered. There was a massive stain across the front of his white t-shirt, streaks on his face and arms, smears on his jeans. It looked like he'd bathed in it. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing at first. It was too surreal, too far outside the realm of normal human experience. The amount of blood was almost cartoonish, like something from a horror movie with bad special effects. But I knew immediately it wasn't fake. The way it had dried in some places and was still wet in others, the way it had soaked into his clothes. This was real. What disturbed me even more than the blood was his expression. Or rather, his lack of one. His eyes were completely empty. Blank. He looked bored, like he was just stopping in for gas and cigarettes at 2 a.m. like any other customer. He walked through the door like nothing was wrong, like he wasn't literally drenched in someone's blood. I was frozen. Completely paralyzed. I couldn't look away from him. Every time I managed to tear my gaze away, it snapped right back to his face, to those dead, emotionless eyes. He noticed me staring. Of course he did. I was gaping at him like an idiot, and you know what he did? He smiled. Not a threatening smile. Not a crazy smile. Just a casual, friendly smile, like we were acquaintances who'd bumped into each other at the store. Then he spoke, his voice calm and even, "Don't worry. It's not my blood." As if that was supposed to reassure me. As if knowing the blood belonged to someone else made the situation better instead of infinitely worse. My mind immediately went to the obvious conclusion. This man had killed someone. Maybe multiple people. And now he was standing in my gas station, covered in evidence, smiling at me. And I was alone. Completely alone. Some survival instinct kicked in, overriding my panic. I couldn't run, he was between me and the exit. I couldn't fight, he was bigger and stronger and potentially armed. My only option was to pretend everything was normal. I nodded like he'd made a comment about the weather, and forced myself to look back down at my magazine. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the counter to keep them steady. I could see him in my peripheral vision, walking casually through the aisles like any other customer. He picked up some snacks, chips, I think maybe a candy bar, and brought them to the counter. I rang him up, keeping my eyes on the register, refusing to meet his gaze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. He paid in cash, exact change, and walked out without another word. The door chimed. I heard a car engine start in the parking lot. The second I was sure he'd driven away, I grabbed the phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report. There was a man, he just left my gas station, he was covered in blood. I gave them the description as accurately as I could. The dispatcher was asking follow-up questions, getting details when I heard it. The door chime. I looked up and felt my heart stop. It was him. He'd come back. And he looked furious. I hung up the phone immediately, but it was too late. He'd seen me through the window. He knew exactly what I was doing. He stormed up to the counter, face transformed from blank indifference to pure rage. Did you call the cops? He demanded. No, I. Don't fucking lie to me. I saw you on the phone. Did you call the cops? I put my hands up, trying to appear non-threatening. I didn't, I swear, I was just. Bullshit. He slammed his fist on the counter. I know you called them. Things escalated fast. He was screaming now, calling me every name imaginable, telling me to mind my own business, that I'd made a huge mistake. I just stood there with my hands up, trying to de-escalate, but there was nothing I could say. He'd made up his mind. I saw it coming a split second too late. He launched himself over the counter. Not climbed, launched. Like a linebacker tackling a quarterback, he flew over that counter and drove me to the ground before I could even think about moving. The impact knocked the wind out of me. Before I could catch my breath, his hands were around my throat. He was strangling me. Actually trying to kill me. I'd never been in a real fight before. Never experienced actual life or death violence. The panic was overwhelming. I fought back wildly, kicking, scratching, clawing at his face. I even bit his arm at one point, tasted blood. His? What? Someone else's? Didn't care. We rolled around on the floor behind the counter, knocking over displays and merchandise. I could feel the blood from his clothes smearing all over me, soaking into my shirt and jeans. His hands tightened around my throat. My vision started to tunnel. I was about to pass out. In desperation, I screamed, I have a gun. I'll shoot you. I swear to God I'll shoot you. A complete bluff. There was no gun. But something in my voice must have been convincing. He stopped, released his grip on my throat, scrambled to his feet and ran for the door. I heard the door chime, heard tires squealing in the parking lot, heard his car speeding away. I just lay there on the floor, gasping for air, covered in blood. Some mine from where he'd hit me, most of it from wherever he'd gotten it. The police arrived maybe 10 minutes later. When they saw the state I was in, the blood, the obvious signs of a fight, they immediately went back out to try to find him. I never heard anything after that. No follow-up from police, no news reports, nothing. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he'd done before walking into my gas station that night. But I think about it constantly. About those empty eyes. About how close I came to dying on the floor of a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Now here's where it gets even stranger. A few months later, still working the same job, which was probably my first mistake, something else happened. Something that convinced me the first incident wasn't random at all. It was another late night, circumstances almost identical to before. I was alone, bored, leaning against the counter trying to stay awake. The door chimed and a man walked in. But this wasn't a normal customer. This guy was wearing a suit. An expensive suit, dark gray, perfectly tailored, looked like it cost more than I made in a month. Nobody wears suits to gas stations at midnight. Nobody dressed like that had any business being in a place like this at this hour. He didn't browse the aisles or even glance at the merchandise. He walked straight to the counter with obvious purpose. He still didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. He laid it on the counter and slid it toward me. I looked down at it and felt my stomach drop. It was a photo of him. The blood-covered man from months ago. The photo was slightly blurry, like a screenshot from security footage or a grainy surveillance image. But it was unmistakably the same person. Same build, same face. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but I could feel this man in the suit watching me, studying my reaction. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. His voice was rough, gravelly, like he'd been smoking for decades. Have you seen this man? Every instinct I had was screaming at me to lie. No, I said. Never seen him before. The man in the suit didn't respond immediately. He just stared at me with these cold, calculating eyes that made me feel completely transparent. The silence stretched on, becoming unbearable. I was losing confidence in my lie with every passing second. Finally, he reached down and picked up the photograph. He turned and started walking toward the door. I exhaled, thinking it was over. He stopped right before the exit, turned back around to face me. "I know you're lying," he said calmly. Then he left. I stood there in shock, trying to process what had just happened. Who was that guy? A cop? A detective? But if he was law enforcement, why wouldn't he identify himself? The alternative was worse. He was connected to whatever the blood-covered man had been involved in. Maybe organized crime, maybe something else. And now he knew I'd seen something. I didn't call the police this time. I was too scared of what might happen, and frankly, what could I even report? A man in a suit showed me a photo and asked if I'd seen someone? That's not a crime. Nothing happened for a few days. Then I started noticing things. A silver SUV that seemed to appear in multiple locations. Parked across from the gas station during my day shifts. In the grocery store parking lot when I went shopping. On my street when I got home one evening. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Silver SUVs are common. But when I saw it 3 times in one day, always at a distance, never close enough to see the driver clearly, I knew it wasn't random. Someone was following me. Watching me. I lived alone in a small rental house. No roommates, no one to tell, no one to turn to. I convinced myself it would blow over. That if I just ignored it, whoever it was would lose interest and leave me alone. 3 weeks after the man in the suit visited the gas station, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of shattering glass. I grabbed the baseball bat from under my bed and ran into the living room, adrenaline overriding fear. The room was empty. But sitting in the middle of my living room floor, surrounded by broken glass from my window, was a rock. Fist-sized, ordinary, with no note attached. The message was clear. I know where you live. I can get to you whenever I want. I quit my job the next day. I spent the following month finding a new apartment in a different town, 40 minutes away. I didn't see the silver SUV during that time, but my mind was made up. I moved, got a new job, started over. Nothing happened after that. No more visits, no more surveillance, no more rocks through windows. But I still think about it constantly. The blood-covered man was terrifying, yes, but the man in the suit? That's what really haunts me, because I never figured out why. Why go through all that trouble, the stalking, the harassment, the intimidation, just because I called the cops on someone covered in blood? The only explanation I can think of is that he believed I had some connection to the first guy. That I was protecting him or hiding him or knew more than I was saying. It's been 6 years. I've moved twice more since then, once to a different state entirely. And I've accepted that I'll probably never know the truth about what I witnessed that night. But I know one thing for certain. Whatever that blood-covered man was involved in, it was big enough and dangerous enough that someone was willing to track down every potential witness. I was lucky. I got away. But I'll never forget those empty eyes. Or the cold calculation in the voice of the man who said, "I know you're lying." Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Thank you for sharing both of those experiences. The escalation from one terrifying encounter to being hunted is nightmare fuel. Now let's move on to story number 2. Story 2, the truck bed. This happened about 8 months ago. I work in construction, and this particular job site was about 3.5 hours from my house. Long commute, but the pay was good and the work was steady. The day in question, we'd run into complications, permitting issues, material delays, the usual construction nightmares, and the job took way longer than expected. By the time we wrapped up and I got on the road, it was already past 10 p.m. I was exhausted. Not just tired, but that bone-deep exhaustion that comes from 10 hours of physical labor. And I hadn't had nearly enough coffee to sustain me through what was about to be a 3.5-hour drive home. My truck is old, a 2008 Ford F-150 with over 200,000 miles on it. No fancy features, no lane assist, no adaptive cruise control. Just me and the road. About 45 minutes in, I knew I was in trouble. My eyelids kept drifting closed. I'd shake my head, force myself alert, but within minutes they'd start drooping again. I pulled into the next gas station I saw, somewhere along I-90 in the middle of absolutely nowhere. It was around 10:45 p.m. I filled up my tank, smoked a cigarette, and stood there debating my options. I still had over 2 hours of driving ahead of me, and I knew with absolute certainty that I wouldn't make it without falling asleep at the wheel. So I made the decision to take a quick nap right there in the parking lot. Pull into a corner spot, lock the doors, sleep for an hour or two, then finish the drive refreshed. I'd done it before. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than wrapping my truck around a tree. I parked in the far corner of the lot, away from the building and the lights. There were 2 other vehicles there, a sedan and another truck. I figured they were probably doing the same thing I was. I reclined my seat as far as it would go, set an alarm for midnight, and was out almost instantly. The alarm woke me what felt like seconds later but was actually an hour. I was groggy but definitely more alert than before. Good enough. The parking lot was empty now. Both vehicles that had been there when I arrived were gone. The gas station looked closed, though I could see dim lights inside. I started my truck and pulled back onto the highway without a second thought. For the first 20 minutes or so, everything was fine. The road was deserted. I maybe saw 2 other vehicles the entire time. I was zoning out a bit, letting muscle memory handle the driving while my mind wandered. That's when I started hearing it. A thumping sound. Faint, rhythmic, coming from somewhere behind me. At first, I thought it was something in the back seat. Maybe a tool I'd forgotten to secure, bouncing around with the movement of the truck. I turned around to look. The back seat was empty. Maybe something in the truck bed then. A toolbox shifting around, a loose piece of equipment. I turned down the radio so I could hear better. The thumping was still there, quiet but persistent. It was annoying more than anything else. I made a mental note to check the bed when I got home and kept driving. The sound continued. After about 10 minutes, it was really starting to bug me. I cranked up the radio to drown it out. At one point, frustrated and tired, I slammed my hand against the dashboard and cursed. And the thumping stopped. Complete silence. I was relieved at first, then confused. Why would hitting the dashboard stop a sound coming from the truck bed? It was such a weird coincidence that it actually made me more alert. The brain fog cleared a bit as I thought about it. Inanimate objects don't respond to yelling and hitting dashboards. So what had made that sound? I was debating whether to pull over and check when everything went to hell. Without warning, there was a massive crack directly behind my head. Not a thump. Not a knock. A crack like someone had taken a sledgehammer to one of my windows. I whipped around and saw something that made my heart stop. There was a person standing in my truck bed. A man, tall, wearing a dark hoodie, holding one of my tools. A heavy wrench or crowbar, I couldn't tell which. He was slamming it against the rear sliding window that separated the truck bed from the cab interior. Not tapping. Not knocking. Slamming with full force, over and over, trying to smash through. I could see his face in the darkness. Wild eyes, mouth open in what might have been a scream or just exertion. He looked feral. Animalistic. I swerved hard without meaning to, pure panic response. The truck veered across the lane, nearly went into the ditch, overcorrected and fishtailed. I was spinning. Completely out of control. I thought I was going to flip. Somehow, I still don't know how, I managed to wrestle the wheel back and bring the truck to a skidding stop halfway onto the shoulder. My brain was screaming contradictory commands. Get out. Stay in. Drive away. Fight. I ripped off my seatbelt and threw open the door before I could think about whether it was a smart move. I ran around the truck toward the bed. As I rounded the corner, I saw him, the man in the hoodie, climbing out over the side. He hit the ground and started running toward the tree line off the side of the highway. I chased him for maybe 10 steps before my rational mind caught up with my adrenaline. It was pitch black. I had no weapon. I had no idea if he was armed. We were completely alone. I stopped running and turned back to my truck, jumped in, and peeled out without even checking if he was still visible. I drove for maybe 5 miles before I felt safe enough to pull over and check the damage. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off the engine. I sat there for a few minutes trying to calm down enough to think straight. Finally, I got out and walked around to the truck bed. The rear window was destroyed. Not completely shattered, but spider-webbed with cracks radiating out from multiple impact points. One more hit would have put him through into the cab. Into the cab with me. I climbed into the bed to see what he'd been using to hit the window. But before I found the tool, something else caught my attention. There was a plastic bag in the corner of the bed. A black trash bag, wrapped and twisted on itself multiple times, about the size of 2 fists. It wasn't mine. I'd never seen it before. And it was wet. Damp with something that had soaked through in places. I crouched down to get a better look and immediately gagged. The smell. It smelled like death. Like rotting meat left in the sun for days. Putrid and overwhelming. I didn't want to touch it, but I needed it out of my truck. I needed to be as far away from it as possible. Using just my fingertips, trying not to breathe through my nose, I grabbed the bag and threw it as hard as I could toward the tree line. I climbed out of the truck bed and started walking back to the driver's door when I looked down at my hands. They were tinted red. The bag had been coated in something. Something wet and red that was now all over my fingers and palms. I rubbed my hands frantically on my jeans, feeling sick, trying not to think about what it might be. I got in the truck and drove. Didn't stop again until I was home. I didn't call the police. I didn't tell anyone what happened for weeks. A friend of mine fixed the window a few days later without asking too many questions, and that was that. But I think about it constantly. About what must have happened. The only explanation that makes sense is that he climbed into my truck bed while I was sleeping in that gas station parking lot. My truck doesn't have a bed cover, so it would have been easy. He must have been lying completely flat for the entire drive. For over an hour. Waiting. For what? What was his plan? And that bag. The smell. The red coating. I don't want to know what was in it, but I think I do know. And that's what keeps me up at night. Not just that someone was in my truck hiding, waiting to smash through my window, but what they were carrying with them. And what they were planning to do once they got through that glass. A special thank you to everyone who submitted their stories today. These experiences remind us that gas stations, especially those in isolated areas late at night, can become sites of genuine danger. The people you encounter there aren't always who they seem, and sometimes the choices we make, to investigate a sound, to stop for a nap, to work a late shift, can put us in situations we never anticipated. If you like today's submissions, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss a new story. Until next time, stay cautious, trust your instincts, and remember, if something feels wrong, it probably is. Stay safe out there.